The term Black Friday originally referred to a financial crash in 1869, in which a few dodgy speculators caused the gold markets to crash. In the 1950s, though, a couple of academics started using the term to describe the day after Thanksgiving, because a lot of people would feign illness to get off work to get a long weekend. Certain police departments in US cities also started using it around this time to refer to the beginning of the congested weekend at the start of the Christmas shopping period. Now, in all of these cases, the phrase was applied from the perspective of an outside observer, a bit like an ecologist might describe the annual migration of a gazelle with some kind of term. Picture David Attenborough watching a bunch of shoppers in US cities and saying,
"And here we have the annual Black Friday migration of the consumer class."
In subsequent decades, though, this term Black Friday was actually slowly hijacked by this class of corporate marketers who basically tried to get the gazelle to include it into their own self-identity. Rather than using this term as a after-the-fact description of observed behavior, became a kind of before-the-fact prescription, this call to action that you were supposed to go shopping. The term basically ceased to be a description of herding behavior and morphed into an instruction to stampede the shops. Now, many philosophers and mystics have long sensed that the act of naming can create reality. In fact, my favorite book about this is Ursula Le Guin's masterpiece, A Wizard of Earthsea, where the wizards actually specialize in knowing the names of things in order to be able to actually influence and manipulate the fabric of reality. In fact, some scholars even argue that the magical term abracadabra comes from an Aramaic phrase that means "I create like the word." Again, conjuring this idea that language can create reality and bring things into existence. But modern masters of this speaking into existence are basically corporate marketing teams. By repeatedly naming Black Friday, it was turned from some kind of passive descriptive phrase denoting some loose behavior into an actively charged cultural object that could pull people in like a magnet. In the era of digital globalization, this exploded mimetically through the marketing departments of all other corporations globally. And now it's basically locked in place in every country and probably won't be dislodged until we see the fall of capitalism or the heat death of the universe. Black Friday is now basically a top-down order to behave in a certain way rather than a description of some real bottom-up cultural phenomenon. In this sense, it actually shares a lot of common ground with things like Christmas, which have also been co-opted as a symbol of and actually instruction to engage in mass consumerism. Christmas, however, has something slightly different because Christmas actually holds on to some shreds of an actual religious holiday that once did exist, while Black Friday is a bit like Christmas stripped of any illusion of cultural depth. There's even a term for these artificial engineered holidays. They're called Hallmark holidays. A term derived from the American company Hallmark, which makes a killing of selling cards to celebrate these supposedly organic days. This include Valentine's Day, Boss's Day, and even actually Mother's Day. Some of these actually have some original meaning to them, but something really becomes a Hallmark holiday when the meaning cannot be realized without also simultaneously buying something. Now, when I'm encountering all the Black Friday ads, I'm always reminded of Louis Althusser's concept of interpellation. It refers to this method of programming ideas into people's minds by addressing them as if they already agree with what you're saying. To understand this, let's look at one of the purest examples of this phenomenon, which is Black Friday's sister festival, Cyber Monday. Cyber Monday was basically written into existence by a press release from the National Retail Federation, which is the biggest retail trade association in the world, which said, "Cyber Monday quickly becoming one of the biggest online shopping days of the year." Now, all the subsequent commercial slogans like "Cyber Monday is here" and "Are you ready for Cyber Monday?" basically speak at you as if you're already a person who agrees that this thing is a reality. Picture, for example, an old school grandparent saying to their grandchild, "When are you going to get married?" It seems like a question, right? But think about what's embedded in that question. Embedded in that question is the assumption that the person will get married. If the person answers the question, they're implicitly accepting the premise. Similarly, when these companies say, "Are you ready for Cyber Monday?" they're not asking you whether you think it's real or not. They're telling you that it's real and then asking you what you're going to do about it. This generates this feeling of a movement, of some whole mass of people somewhere, presumably, who already know about this thing that you're only catching on to now. Of course, nobody has ever seen anyone ever celebrate Cyber Monday because in reality it has no organic existence. Like the current version of Black Friday, it was genetically reverse engineered by companies that spoke about it as if it really were a reality. Once you become aware of this phenomenon, you'll see it everywhere. For example, during the rise of digital payments companies in London, they kept on putting up these signs saying, "Contactless is here," addressing you as if you were a person who was expecting this thing to arrive, as if there was some kind of delivery man arriving at your door saying, "I have brought you this thing that you asked for. It is here." For example, here's an internal pitch deck from the company Amex. In this playbook, they're trying to explain to their clients how to convince customers to switch to contactless payments. Here's a template, for example, where they use that phrase, "Contactless payments have arrived." They instruct their clients to loudly and clearly say, "Contactless is here." As they note, this kind of language will present the company as being a kind of hero who has arrived to meet the needs of these customers, needs that they previously didn't actually realize that they had. This is a classic example of interpellation, speaking at people as if they already agree with you. This reverse engineers the idea into the person's mind that there's something obvious that's being said by the corporate marketer. And that's a classic way of Trojan horsing the idea that everybody else thinks this thing's a reality. Perhaps the saddest new example of this interpellation is Black Friday week. Companies like Amazon will now speak to us as if Black Friday week is a reality. Black Friday is not some kind of organic human celebration like our harvest festival. It's a top-down corporate order to behave in a certain way. But hey, maybe we should also start to co-opt this process of interpellation and create new days that we want to see in the world. So here's my wish for this Black Friday. Give it a new name and then go speak to people as if that thing's a reality. Maybe you can start by dropping it in the comments. See you next time.